Hi everybody, I'm Scarlett and I'm a teacher from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and I'm very honored to have a Zoom talk with nobody less than Rick Mooney. Uh, every cellist and every teacher must be aware from who Rick Mooney is. He is the author of really great cello books. I've been using them for more than 20 years. And well, Rick, nice to see you again.
Thanks. Yes, it's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a while. How long has it been? More than 6 months? More than a year?
I think maybe more than a year. Yeah.
Time
Since
flies.
since you and I were discussing before people came in the new look here, I don't think saw much of this the last time we talked, and I think this is 2 years going now.
Yes, yes, yes. It must have been more than a year because now we live now in Velp near Arnhem. Yes, and you've got such a wonderful chimney, and your Christmas tree is up.
Thank you. Yes, I decided to not do it up in the studio because I thought maybe we were going not going to play today, but talk, and so I figured I'd give it a little bit more home feel. So yeah, the fireplace and the Christmas tree went up yesterday. We put it up. Randy and I, my wife and I, put it up after Thanksgiving, our American Thanksgiving every year, and so that's ready to be festive and nice. And this is Jacqueline. This is Jacqueline. She's one of five, and all but one of them have got musical names. So
Ah, Jacqueline Dupre.
that's right. That's right.
Very nice. Well, Rick, the reason why we get together, I have been a bit. I've think I have emailed you several times. Let's have a talk about you, about who you are, what you did, about how you came to play the cello. Because you are right, you did give us a lot of information while doing the Zoom sessions on position pieces one, position pieces two, double stops, and from position one and two. But still, I think you are a very, very interesting person. I want to give you a stage to tell about you yourself. So, can you please tell us at what age you started to play the cello and why the cello?
Okay. I'll be happy to do this, and I'll not embellish too much of the story. But if your people want to know more, can you do chat or something and field questions as it happens? Maybe people will have questions after I talk about some of these things. I I started back in the old days, back in where the traditional starting thing was to start on the piano. So I was on the piano at age 5, and then about age 8 was the cello. And well, it's okay. This is a little different than you might expect from some other people too. The reason I played the cello was my mom needed a cellist for her children's string quartet. I have 3 siblings, and violin, viola, and we're already picked by the others. I was the last to pick a stringed instrument, so it was cello. And so that's how I did it. It was not the kind of situation where I longed to play this particular instrument. There it is.
And where did you live then? There was a cello teacher around?
There was, yeah. I've lived in Southern California my whole life, and so it's a pretty active area in the arts. The problem was I'm not well. I'll go ahead and say this now. I didn't try to put all this in order, but the problem that I had was my beginning training was not very good. And I don't think I was put with accomplished or experienced teachers. One guy, for instance, was the principal cellist in the San Diego Symphony. Now, I'm obviously a good player, but they're not always. That doesn't always mean they're good teachers. So this went on for a long time. Let me say a few things. Okay, I'm going to just be free thought here, because it has come up a lot in my discussions with teachers, is that I had pretty poor training. I accept 50% of the blame for my relative lack of success on the cello when I was young, because I was not very enthusiastic. I was not amazingly motivated to practice. But as I got older, I began to realize, you know what, I'm really only going to take 50% of the blame, because my teachers didn't help me out very much. And here's one of the extreme examples. Okay, my teacher at the time gave me the Squire Tarantella, which, as most sort of early teenage boys, I just loved it. And I played it forever and practiced really hard and played it in public. And you could almost hear what was going on in his head was, well, gosh, if tarantellas are the answer, then the very next piece he gave me was the Popper Tarantella. And it was absurd, because here's a jump from about a book 6 level to about a book 12 level or 11. And I simply could not play it. There was stuff in there that I was completely unprepared to do. And so I'll come back to that, and maybe when we talk more about teaching. But my main point was, why should I feel motivated to take on something that's literally and obviously impossible? And so there I was back into my old thing again. So when I've tried, I have said this many times, if I am considered to be a good teacher, I think one of the reasons why I am is because I had such poor training myself, and I had to fix it as a young adult. And so that meant that I was quite aware of all the things I needed to fix, and I'm quite aware of what I had to do to make that happen. And that means that I had the information and the knowledge of what I needed to teach my students early on, and not have to have them figure it out later. One of the little passing quotes that came my way through the history somewhere, in talking with a college level or university level or conservatory teacher about their students, their freshman students, as they come in, and the question was asked with the idea that if we're out here and preparing students to go to see this guy in the university, what should we be doing? And what he said was, well, you know, the fact is the students come to me and I basically spend a year fixing them. And so at that point in time, I felt like, okay, then my goal is to make sure that when my students go to that place, they don't have to be fixed. They're ready to move on. They're going to be prepared physically with their body and with their knowledge, so that they can take right as a freshman at university, that they can take and move forward and not have to get fixed for a year. So hence I've adopted the Suzuki system as the main core, which I can talk about more, obviously. And I did my own books, because none of that stuff really existed for the age level of student that I was trying to teach. And so I needed to have something that was appropriate for them. So you see, okay, so the failing that I have now, because of my bad start, is I have not covered the highest of the cello repertoire myself. I have not played Shostakovich Concerto, for instance. I've looked at the first movement. That's it. I've not played Schumann. I've not played Brahms F. There is just some repertoire that I simply don't know, and I'm quite comfortable taking a student through the first concertos, the Haydn, the Boccherini, the Saint-Saëns. I'm quite comfortable with that. But if I've got a student who is looking like maybe they're going to go on, then I send them to another teacher, another teacher who knows that repertoire, who has been in the conservatory and can better prepare them for that kind of experience. Another little side trip, since we're talking about me. I went to USC, the University of Southern California, which is a very high-powered school, very high-powered music school, private university here in Southern California. Piatigorsky and Heifetz are the names that were there a generation ago. And so it was a big, big deal. And I went to USC as a music major, and I admit, I agree, completely out of place there. Not really the caliber that it takes to be a success there. The reason, if you want to know, is that I got a chance to go to university a year early and avoid 1 year of what we call high school, and do basically 1 year, 2 years all at once. And in order to qualify for that program, the logical major to declare was music, because I had been doing it all along. But when I got there, I was just really out of place. And what happened was this: the teacher that I had there kind of definitely told me that I should seek some other career, and that he couldn't prepare me for a recital in 4 years. And so I went and took math, and we can come back to that. But the interesting thing is, two things come of that. One is that was really the very first time I made my own choice about playing the cello, because I realized that if I changed majors and didn't sign up for at least 1 unit of cello lessons, that I'd probably never play it again. And I made the decision, I don't want that. I want to at least have it. So I signed up for 1 unit of cello lessons, which is 30 minutes a week, the least you can get, just to keep it going. The second part about that, the good news, is I went to the teacher who was teaching cello minors at the time, Eleanor Schoenfeld, who is pretty much a worldwide name by now. And she could teach me. She could actually, for the first time, deal with the things that I didn't do well and help me overcome them. And for the first time, I felt like I could be successful on the instrument because she fixed the problems. And so the other teacher was undoubtedly, it was Gabor Raito was the other teacher. He was an excellent player. Excellent. But I think we may even still today see some teachers in conservatory level who are excellent players and know all the repertoire and can coach a student who comes to them highly prepared with their technique and their fundamentals, and can coach them and help those students along, and yet cannot fix a student who comes to them with problems. And Eleanor Schoenfeld did that. So she turned my life around on the cello, and that helped me then to continue. A lot of people contributed to this as I kept it going. But one of the things I mentioned this for is that people ask me if I ever regret doing math degree, because I was going for computer science. And back then, so you got to realize I'm old, right? Back then, there was no undergrad computer science degree. It was all postgrad, and you had to do either electrical engineering or math as an undergrad. I wasn't interested in the machines. I was interested in the programming, so I took math. And that was the day when the IBM 360 computer took up an entire room, right? And you typed your program out on computer cards and gave it to the tech who ran the thing. And it's that old. It's just that long ago. And so people ask me if I regretted doing that. And my answer is absolutely not, as it turns out, absolutely not. I could not solve a calculus problem for you today if my life depended on it, because I don't remember the rules. But math teaches you how to think. Math teaches you how to look at a problem, break it down into chunks, put it in order, and come up with a solution.
That's beautifully said.
And I always kind of thought one of the things I was really good at in math was geometry. I just, one of the only topics that I just aced all the way through. Even, I won't get off on this, but it kind of fascinates me. Even in college, when we studied Riemannian space, you see, we all learned Euclidean geometry, which postulates the universe as an infinite cube. Well, Riemannian space postulates the universe as an infinite sphere. And the rules change when it's a sphere and not a cube. And yet I aced that too. And, you know, I think about my student. I have this student in front of me, and I have over here all the theorems and all the corollaries and all the things that I need to know. And if I put them in the right order, I come up with a solution.
And Rick, in those years, what kind of future as a cellist did you see for yourself?
I actually was not thinking about a cello future at that point in time. There was another thing that happened that was fortunate at that time, is that I was doing teaching already, and there was a community school department at the University of Southern California that taught the younger children. And there was a woman there who was teaching the Suzuki method, who was not a cellist, but there were no cellists available. And she was sort of thrilled when I approached her about teaching cello. And so I got training from her, what we used to call the apprenticeship style, where basically I studied in her studio for 2 years. And she had old 3/4-inch reel-to-reel videotapes of some of the teachers when she was in Japan. And basically, to cut this short, she led me through the repertoire as far as it went that in those days for the cello. And I continued on teaching. And so so it turned out that actually the playing of the instrument was not even my main focus when I started switching back. It was the teaching of the instrument that got to me. And I loved the playing as well. And I knew very well that I needed to become better at that if I was to become a better teacher. And so I did that too. But mostly it was teaching that helped turn me that direction again.
How many years did it take before you thought, well, buy math, buy computers?
Yeah. You said taught well. Yes, I that's a very hard question, because I think a lot of my teaching was pretty good. I mean, I've been teaching for a very long time. When I was in what we call junior high school, so I was 14 or something like that. My mom was a violin teacher, and when she had a brother or sister that wanted to start an instrument, she'd say, "Why didn't you study cello?" And she pushed them off to me. So I had a lot of experience. And one of my very first students is still playing, by the way. She lives in New York now. So I didn't kill off my first student. That's pretty good. and and I had been teaching for a long time, and so I had already some things and I was already doing pretty well. The students were doing pretty well. I learned so much later, though. It was a process. It was, and I'm still learning things, and I was learning things through the Suzuki Association as we developed this program called Suzuki Principles in Action. And that was way after I was in it for good for years, for decades, and I was still learning things. So I guess I don't really have a time frame for that, except that it was a continuous thing that happened.
All right. Then at what age How did you come to writing your own methods?
That also sort of just happened one day. Well, first of all, I guess double stops was the first one. And the point here, well, let me start with something that permeates all these books. There are two things. One is the way I was taught, and many of my colleagues, and the story about the pauper tarantella. I have dubbed that teaching system the sink or swim method, which is you get thrown into the deep end of the pool, and you either swim or you don't. And you're totally unprepared, but thrown out there in the deep end. So I have felt like my job has been to put the shallow end on the pool so that the students can go step by step by step by step to the deep end. And when they get there, and not only can they swim, but they actually kind of love it. After I finished, is when I was testing out a thumb position book 2 with some of my students. We got through my sort of test pages, and I sent them off to poppers. Not only could they do it, but they loved it. One of my guy kept saying, "When can we do another one?" Well, that was not even in my vocabulary. I still have dates written in pauper etudes that I supposedly studied when I was in high school, but which I can't play today. Number 13. I can't even play that today. And yet apparently I was asked to do it when I was in high school. And so this sink or swim method just doesn't work. Okay. The other thing is the age level of students that I was dealing with. With the advent of the Suzuki system and the idea that young children could in fact be successful playing a stringed instrument, meant that we had lots of material, really actually very good material, but it was all too hard for the kids. So you will discover as you look through the books that there's very little in terms of new concept, in terms of new ideas. The things that are presented in Starker's organized method are things that I use in my books, but I just use repertoire and things which are appropriate for children. And you have to remember this too. I'm when you think about the famous method books that are out there, the Kummer and the Dotzar and the Klingel and the all of those, Grutzmacher and Frankuhler, all of those, Duport, you have to stop and think for a minute about what their students looked like. I doubt that there were very many quarter-sized cellos being made during that period of history. I doubt that there were very many children studying the cello. And I bet that what these teachers saw when the student came to them, were people who had already become fairly accomplished on the piano, people who had already studied music theory and understood notations and intervals and could probably do a good bit of sight singing. And with that foundation, they could pick up the cello in their mid-teen years and be quite successful with the repertoire that was available then, because they're ready for that stuff. But again, if I'm teaching an 8-year-old, it doesn't work. So I needed to take, in order to put the shallow end on my pool, I needed to take those ideas and present them in a way that the children could accomplish them successfully. And the idea, back to this business of motivation, all of us teachers, we all have issues about motivation with our students. You simply can't avoid it. It happens. But one, I believe, of the main factors in having a positive motivation is if the students are feeling successful. And if they feel like they are making progress. And in that sense, that's why we need to have for children smaller steps, smaller increments than for an adult. And we need to present it in such a way that, yes, okay, I had a student who went through a phase. She was already 11 or 12. She went through a phase because she's actually quite good, but she was like, oh, I can't do this. I just can't do it. And I had to remind her, you're leaving a word off. You can't do it yet. And the idea is that this is how we learn, is we take on something that we can't do yet, and we learn how to do that. And we make that progress, and then we're ready to take on the next step of the thing that we can't do yet. And the job of the teacher is to provide appropriate steps for the age and abilities of those students that are in front of them. And if you give them the proper size step, the student can always be moving forward and feeling successful, and thereby more likely to be well motivated to continue. So all of that exists in these books, right? Double stops was mainly because I thought one of the other great influences in my teaching was Margaret Rowell. And she studied she studied or helped develop a system of teaching with Paul Roland, who's rather famous on the violin. And Margaret Rowell and Irene Sharp was her I can't remember, her not student, but her teacher apprentice, who went off and carried it forward. But for the first time, I was dealing with the whole concept of how to play the instrument with naturalness and ease, and not forcing it and not tension. I remember the first time Margaret, in fact, asked me if I could double stop on a vibrato. I could vibrato on a double stop. And I kind of went, you mean that's even possible? Because my hand was so locked up, there was no way. So the idea is that double stops, at that point in my own playing, or maybe beyond that, but my own playing, I had to overcome that. So when I get to my students, one of the things, I'm so sorry, so many things go this way. One of the things I learned in developing the Suzuki Principles in Action course, which again, one knows, but to put it in words and a nice context is really, really good. And here's one of the things that I learned, which is in a lesson, what you do is much more important than what you say. And I think that's terribly important to remember, because too many teachers want to explain to the students how to do things. And let's just face it, you can't explain the inexplicable. You can't describe in words how something feels. You need to give the children a thing to do that then they know how it feels. And it's the activity that's important, because that's how they learn the actual feeling of whatever it is you're trying to get across. And if you want to put a trigger word on it so that when you recall it in the future, that connection is made, like if I ask a student to be doing this, to relax their shoulders and get into their back, and I call it a bird wings. Well, every time I say bird wings, they know, oops, drop my shoulders. And, the trigger word works, but you can't explain that with words. You have to give them exercises. One of the greatest ways to set up a left hand is with double stops. Just because it forces your hand into certain patterns that if you're incorrect this way or incorrect this way, you simply can't do it. Yes. And in this way, I gave the students a whole bunch of activities that that allowed them to feel the feeling of the proper hand position. And along the way, of course, you got to work on stuff like don't squeeze, because everybody squeezes in general, and everybody really squeezes on double stops. So you have to work on that softness in here. But when you think again, before my double stops book, there were double stops etudes out there. I went through all my etude books and looked for them. There are two problems. One problem was they're too long and too hard. They deal with too many concepts and too many different patterns and too many things all at once for a person who is learning them for the first time, for someone who's already done something, well, here's a great way to sort of polish it up and get it back, but not for the first time. The second problem is there simply weren't enough of them. And the idea is, to me, is that the only way that we acquire and master a skill is through repetition. And Suzuki used to say, please do that 10,000 times. One of the American teachers over there saw one of the Japanese teachers doing a thing, and he come back a little while later, and the Japanese teacher was still doing the thing. And he said, why are you continuing to do that? And the Japanese student said, Mr. Suzuki asked me to do this 10,000 times. And the American guy looked at her and said, well, he's just kidding, isn't he? You know, because Mr. Suzuki was kind of like that. He was happy. And she looked back at him and says, no, I don't think so. He meant 10,000, count them, times. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of research in other areas of skill, including sport, where what people recognize is it takes like 10 years of skill building to become accomplished at what you're doing. And that's that amount of repetition we're talking about here. So I actually, and then just a little side story, just for fun, since we're just talking about stuff today, I actually did something 10,000 times and counted. It was at one shift. Dee-yum-bum, the first three notes of the Gavotte and the Francoeur E major sonata. And I was missing that beat, missing it. I said, okay, fine, dude. It's time for you to put your money where your mouth is. You keep telling your students 10,000 times, so do it. So I started out, I kept little hash marks, okay? And I did it 100 times a day until I realized that at that rate, my recital was going to be over. So I had to do it 500 times a day. And I'll tell you what, I know that spot. I'm really good at it to this day. But the idea partly is to realize the size of 10,000. I ask my students, if you do something 10 times a day, how long does it take you to get to 10,000? Well, then they realize it's 1,000 days, and they realize that that's 3 years. And so if you're going to do it 10,000 times, 10 times a day, that's fine. But if you want to get done sooner than 3 years, well, you got to do it more.
Yes, super.
One of the things, though, that saves us about this kind of thing is that the repetition's built into the repertoire in the Suzuki system. You don't have to do one piece 10,000 times, because that technique or that issue, the musical issue, comes over and over and over again in the books. And that's where I was interested in having so much repetition in my books with different pieces. So there's variety and keeps the children's interest high. But it's a lot of repetition built into the level where they can truly master something and have it a skill that's usable in the future. So that again is why I said there weren't enough double stops book available to suit me, double stops exercises to suit me, because first of all, I needed to start very simply and get them started simply with the curve of their finger with an open string to get that whole concept started, because you can't do that if your elbow's here, right? Even just that one. Yes. And going through all the other fingering patterns and making sure that they're doing them without squeezing, and having lots of pieces in it, lots of short pieces that they can do and move through without getting stuck on any one for a terribly long length of time, and get their repetition in a relatively pleasant way.
Right. But Rick, tell us, how did that go? You've got Alfred Music, who publishes your books. Did you make your own? Did you bring your transcripts there? How did that work?
The Alfred Music started out as Sumi Burchard, and Sumi Burchard Music was the worldwide distributor of the Suzuki method. And I knew people in the publishing house because of my work with Suzuki. And we were, coincidentally with this, the cello committee for the Suzuki Association of the Americas has been going on just about as long as I've been teaching. and has been working on revisions of the books and stuff. And some of the questions we might get to it, to talking about that. But so I knew some of by some of these interactions, I knew some of the people in that publishing house. And so when I decided I really had a book that I wanted to just publish out there, get it out where, in a way that I myself as an individual could not, I talked to them. And so Sumi Burchard agreed and published that first book. And once I was there, the logical thing was to go back there. And the books have been successful enough that they don't mind that if I bring them another idea, they're pretty willing to do it. And so because Sumi Burchard was bought up for a while by Time Warner, and it went through a variety of owners, and finally Alfred Music looks like has picked them up for good. With the idea, I think Alfred Music has got its special niche. It's very important sort of student preparatory educational philosophy, if you will, outlook for their publishing house. And so these kinds of books go right along with that.
Super. And what was your second book then in your line?
The second book was Position Pieces, Book 1. And it started out with an idea. Well, Carrie Hockett, who is a very fine, very well-known teacher, Carrie Beth Hockett, she's been a lot in Europe. She lived in England for a while, and so she's been all over the world. And she had this little piece called Countdown, where you replace one finger on the same note over and over again. And it's very cute, and it's very short, and you can do it in group class, and you can put in variations on it if you want. And it was such a great way to simply learn a spot. Now, here again, back to my personal experience, I was taught positions through, gosh, what is that called now? Starts with a B. But it was W is like Werner or somebody, introducing the positions. There was a whole book of one-liners on fourth position, and that's how we did it back then. First to fourth, that was it. And I didn't really learn any of the in-betweener positions. I was a guy that would do this kind of shifting over and over again just to avoid the other positions because I couldn't play them. And of course, these G sharps and C sharps over here are so cool in third position if you know how to find it. So this countdown was such a great idea because you learn second position and third position, you just by substituting one finger on the same note over and over again. So I began starting to play around with writing a couple of short little compositions that would accomplish the same thing for other spots on the fingerboard. And of course, that then evolved into the idea of, well, you know what, we could really teach a lot here if we really identified the target notes and the positions that they were in, and really identified the finger numbers and gave them names and gave repetition for each one of them. And so it evolved into a whole book from that experimentation with one piece.
And at that point, what was your age, and did you drop maths or?
Yeah, by this time I'm a cello teacher for good. I really didn't, well, I got my degree, my university degree in math, because you kind of, for various reasons, you often need to have the certificate that you're a university graduate. But I never had an actual professional job in math or computers. I continue to use it in my own way. I've programmed my own database for the Cello Institute, for instance, and I understand how to do that and how to customize those things. But I never did that. By the time I graduated from university, I was married. I had a full load of students with supporting us as a music teacher. My wife was a nurse, and that helped immeasurably. But by then, there was no reason to change again. Here I am. I'm a music teacher.
Yes, yes.
And so that happened. I mean, that evolved through the real interesting, or it evolved through my university years, this little journey that I had, once the university was over, I was in the cello teaching for good.
Did it make you famous in the United States? Your books, did they?
Books, I guess so. Yeah, it's one of those things. The first time someone says famous to me, I kind of went, wow, you know. But if one definition of fame is that people know you through the things you have done rather than knowing you in person, then I guess I'm famous because people know me through the things I've done, with
Yes.
without me actually being there.
True. Rick, when I look up your name, then I get all these hits on your books and on things that you do, but I see very little information about you. You do not have a website. There's no really real biography. That must be a choice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is kind of a choice. First of all, as I was growing up, none of that existed, right? And so, yeah, my for a long time, my mindset was my first thought was not to put something up on a web page on a computer. It just wasn't because I had never done that before. And let's just use now for an example. Now I'm retired. Now I'm kind of stopping, and there doesn't really seem to be a need to do any websites or biographical materials other than what kind of exists in a little clip that I have. And so yeah, it just the way it happened.
Do you feel retired?
I do because I have a lot more free time than I used to have. I'm finding ways to use it, of course. But I have a lot more free time. My schedule's much more clear than it used to be. I am teaching 9 students still. You know what it's like. I'm sure all of you listening who are teachers, you don't just cut off a student and say, "Okay, I'm retired. Goodbye." You've got years and years and years of experience together, and unless the situation is perfect, you'll keep them. So I've got these 9 students who are just doing wonderfully, and they're enthusiastic, and they're practicing a lot, and they're doing great. And as long as we have that very positive energy, and I'm not having to deal with some of the typical problems that I did back in the days when I was younger with problem parents and unmotivated students and schedules that couldn't be fixed because I was too busy and didn't have any time, those things are all past me. And so the whole experience of these 9 students feels quite nice. And they're going to matriculate out. They're going to graduate out. I told you already that I send my students off to other teachers. Used to send them to Eleanor before she died. And one of those students I just saw a week ago because we recorded in his area of town. And he went to Eleanor, he went to Juilliard, he's in the LA Philharmonic Symphony as a full-time player now. So he's done great. And so there are a couple like that. Then when Eleanor died, then I sent a couple of students to Ron Leonard, who is not just a fine cellist, being first chair of the LA Phil, but he taught at Eastman. He's quite a teacher as well. And one of my students that I sent to him was Paul Bianco. And anybody who follows cello very hard has seen Paul is just breaking ground out there. He is doing amazing things. And he just got the cello gig for the Kronos Quartet. He is now the official cellist for Kronos.
Fantastic.
So that's him. Now Ron is also kind of retired. He's not taking new students. But there's a young woman here named Sarah Koo, who also is a master's graduate from Juilliard. And I've sent a couple of my students to her. One of them went off to Rice. One of them is working with her right now. She just won and performed the last movement of the Saint-Saëns cellos with the Interlaken Orchestra in the summer camp. So she's also doing really well and maybe headed for the conservatory. And I currently have one that in another year I'll send off to Sarah because she's doing that well. And I'll take her through those first three concertos and send her along. So there's one will be gone. I have another one that graduated high school, went off to college this year. So I lost one, which was fine. It's the intention. I'll have others that will do the same kind of thing, that they'll move along, they get to their high school graduation, to go off to university, and that's perfect. You know, that takes care of itself.
That's the way it should be, huh? Um, you are the founder of the National Cello Institute.
Right.
I'm Dutch. Can you tell me something about it and
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
it in?
And that's one of our questions here. So I'm really glad to have a chance to deal with that. If I don't know if I'm hitting much of this, but we can at any time you can kind of change the course of my rambling here, and we can get more specific. The National Cello Institute started in 1976. It's now 48 going to be this summer, or I think it's 48. It began in the pattern with like the template of the violin institutes that had been going on in the United States in the summertime for a number of years, which I found interesting. I thought about these other institutes. Stevens Point's the oldest one, and Ithaca, New York is the next oldest one. And I realized at some point in time that the National Cello Institute is only 1 year younger than Ithaca College. So it's one of the old ones now. When the Suzuki system came out and the kids were playing a common repertoire, which is worth talking about if people want to talk about it, when the kids were playing a common repertoire so they could play together and do the same pieces and have groups and have an experience with peers, you know. One of the things that's very cool is to get out there and play with other people. Otherwise, you practice in your room and then you go and have your lesson, and then you practice in your room and then you go and have your lesson. And it's really hard to keep the interest up in a young person that way. To give them the opportunity to play in groups with others is just fabulous. It does great things for their energy. Plus the fact that as they grow through this, they're sitting down here as a beginner and they're looking at those guys up there going, you know, I really want to play that piece. And that's a motivator for them as well. So the Suzuki Institutes were born as summer camps, if you will, 1 week long, usually at a university campus, but not always. University campus because it has the facilities, the rooms and the pianos and the concert spaces and things. So what was happening, and this is a little bit of a surprise the way it happened. In 1975, I was on a faculty here right where I live in Claremont, California, on a cello faculty of a violin institute right nearby. Me and Yvonne Tate were on the faculty, and Yvonne and we were at a point in time when the cello students were the stepchildren. They got the worst rooms and they got the worst schedules, and every time someone said Suzuki, they always said Suzuki violin, Suzuki violin. And of course, Yvonne, if anybody ever had a chance, she's been gone for so long, you guys probably have never seen her, but she was just so outspoken. Someone would say Suzuki violin, and Yvonne would put her finger on the table, go, and cello, and started to get that going. So at this 1975 institute, we pretty much decided, you know what, it's time to get out from under this violin thing and let's have a cello institute.
Okay.
And we went to the person who was then the president of the Suzuki Association of the Americas. It was John Kendall, and said, we want to have a cello institute. Is that all right? And he said, sure, go for it. And the thing that to this day I don't remember how this happened is that we're leaving this 1975 institute. We're leaving on the last day of the institute. Yvonne turns to me and says, I'll see you next year at the Cello Institute, Rick. And it landed on my shoulders. And that's how it happened. That's how it started.
Wow, that's nice to know.
So it has gone on and grown and developed, and it became to the point where I am no longer teach an exclusively Suzuki repertoire. And even though I myself teach it to my students, there are many other students who come from a background where they don't know all of the Suzuki pieces. But our goal at the time, even back in the old days there, was we want to show that if a person gets good teaching, they will become a good player, no matter what method they happen to use. If the unfair thing back in the day when everybody was putting Suzuki method down is that, if back before then, if a student was bad, they wouldn't say, oh, that Kuber method is just no good. They would never say that. They would say, oops, you've had bad training. And now, however, as the Suzuki came up, and if there was a student that wasn't doing very well, they would blame the Suzuki method.
Oh,
They would
really?
say, oh, this method doesn't work. And it's
Really?
just terribly unfair, just terribly unfair. And so we the point being, the kind of teaching you get is more important than the method you use. And there's some stuff about the Suzuki method that makes it important to me and why I continue to teach that sequence of things. But it's not about the method, it's about the quality of the teaching. So our goal was to show at the National Cello Institute this in action. We wanted to see the very best players, and we wanted to see at a certain point in time, you couldn't tell who came through the Suzuki system and who did not, because the good playing and the good teaching showed, and didn't matter which method.
Here, here. Rick, the first question that I printed out for us,
Yes.
um, can you tell us something about it? Ganop Silpa Anan? I hope that I pronounced that correct. My question would be, what does Rick think about the new Suzuki cello edition and recordings? Has anything changed? Was another question.
Yes, and I'm glad that you asked. I was heavily involved with some of these revisions for a number of years, and I had to leave. I had to leave it. It became just too hard. I was dealing with the cello committees of Europe and of the United States and of Australia. There's a regional name for that down there. And then there was a Japanese Terry group of cellists trying to come up with compromises and things that would all work. I was dealing with translators because for the first time we're going to have languages in there. And so I had translators from France and Germany and Spain or Spanish, and we were trying to deal with that. And I was dealing with the committees, I was dealing with the publishers, et cetera, et cetera. And it just got to the point where it was just impossible for me. Everything got done with book one. And suddenly the Japanese teachers are going to complain about something. And I said, wait a minute, I have spent countless hours on this, and don't feel, thank you, this is now me, my attitude showing, I don't feel like making another change. So I got away from it. But the typesetting of the book one is mine. I'm one of the things I got good at since I'm not afraid of computers and since I do music all the time, I've gotten very good at Finale, which is the music typesetting program. There's another, but it was the oldest one, Finale. And so I took on the typesetting, the idea being that if you're a music typesetter and you get music, I liken it to this. If I speak English and I get a text that's in Russian and I need to be typesetting that, I can very, very carefully copy down what I see on this page, but not knowing what all the diacritical marks mean, not knowing what they mean, allows lots of error to happen just for lack of knowledge. And so I have felt that a musician doing the typesetting is very important because we know the function of all the marks and we know where to put them and how to put them there and what's appropriate and what's not and what's redundant. So I did all of that. Now, I haven't seen the new books yet, so I don't even know if they're available. Someone has asked about the new books, so obviously they've seen something. But I have not seen them, nor have I heard the new recordings. We can talk about that separately. We did several things in the new books, though, that I think are really, really valuable. Because another person asked about fingerings on every note. We all rebel at that, all of us. And so books, all of these books, 1, 2, and 3, because I also did typesetting for book 2 and 3, though not quite to the polished and finished extent I did book 1. But we are not going to do that. We sort of drew up, we, meaning the Suzuki Association of the Americas Cello Committee, who sort of headed this whole process. We made a few very specific decisions. And one of those decisions was if we put a fingering once in the piece, when that same melody occurs later in the piece, we do not put fingerings in, but cause the students to make the connection for themselves. And so this the person who was asking what I thought about fingerings on every note should be gone. Just should not happen anymore. So I've also did a few things, like I tried to get the phrases on the page exactly the way they're phrases. French folk song in our old books were five bars on a line when the phrase was 4 bars long. And it meant that it didn't lie on the page so that the families, whether it be the student or the parent, could actually see how the phrase was lying on the page. 4 bars, 4 bars, 4 bars, 4 bars. So French folk song now is laid out that way, one phrase, one line. Perpetual motion is the same. Perpetual motion, it was, the lines began and ended in the middle. The musical lines ended in the middle of the physical lines. Well, now they're all on one line. Okay. So we're hoping that a lot of these kinds of things make sense. We made some decisions about the articulation marks that I hope people appreciate, where we are trying to say, we looked at, as we did this, we looked at the new violin books, and there's a place in Allegro where I swear they use a dot over a note, a dot and a line over a note, and then a line over a note, all in the same piece, all in Allegro in book 1. And you look at that and you kind of say, what does this mean, really? So we made a decision when we were doing this. If one articulation mark will do, we don't need to put down 2, to confuse the issue. And we made a lot of those kind of decisions. So it is my hope that those books come out much more clean and much more logical and much more easy to see than the old books. And I would be very interested in seeing if it's actually come out. I was kind of expecting when this finally, because I quit this more than a year ago, and I'm still getting emails about the process, so I don't even know. But I kind of expected they'd send me a copy when it got done, and I have not gotten a copy. The existence of new recordings, the only thing that I know about that is it was decided sort of internationally that the recording should reflect exactly what is in the books. And if we make some changes in the books, we should make new recordings to reflect those changes. And so that's where new recordings became important. And as I said, there's been a system, a process of selecting a person to make those recordings. And I understand some of those recordings have actually been made, but I have not seen or heard any of it myself. So I can't really answer that question.
Clear. So you are obviously a very big person in Suzuki for cellists in America. That to me is new because I'm European. I mainly know your books.
Oh, yeah.
What's more important for you? can, if you can put it that black or white, Suzuki or your method?
I use them side by side. My books are designed to reinforce what the Suzuki things, to reinforce them and supplement them. For instance, it happens in, as you know, in book two, the first shift is the second position, which was interesting because, as I said, when I was young, that never happened. And it's really pretty nicely done in terms of repetition. There's a lot of that second position throughout the books. But my idea was to present these positions in an order. And again, at this point, the supplementary part of it is mostly about reading. Now, we can talk about the Suzuki method in reading if you want. I'll say this much about it. Back in the day, people complained that Suzuki students didn't learn to read. And we know now, over many years, that if the student doesn't learn to read, it's not the method's fault, it's the teacher's fault. Okay? And you need to find a way. The students have got to be able to read music. And so you need to find a way to do that, to accomplish that thing. And one of the ways was this separate book. It's a whole set of separate tunes. Here's a good example of it. When I started with position pieces, well, let me back up one step. When I did double stops, I chose sort of North American folk songs for the most part, which are the ones that I know. Somebody once told me, gosh, you know, there are some really great Canadian folk songs, and I'm absolutely positive that that's the truth, but I don't know them. So I used folk songs from North America, and that have, of course, came a lot from England as well, from the British. There's a lot of influence there. The point being that most of the children either recognize the actual tune, or it's transparent enough of a tune that they can easily tell when they're in tune and out of tune. Because it's another problem in general, but especially with double stops, is if it's out of tune, you have to notice it and you have to do something about it. So I chose folk songs for that purpose, to help the students themselves to be able to diagnose their intonation. But I thought about that when it came to position pieces, and specifically decided not to do it that way because I wanted it to be a reading book. Okay, we've got the technique introduced here. Let's use the same technique, and let's give them the chance to do it with reading. So again, you'll find the technique that's required in the pieces is often less difficult than the technique required in the Suzuki repertoire, because the technique, that kind of playing technique, gets taught over there. The shifting techniques get reinforced here, but the pieces are simpler because they're also supposed to be for reading. So that's why they go side by side. There's another thing about this is thumb position. First of all, I don't think there's enough thumb position preparation in our Suzuki system to prepare us adequately for the Haydn Concerto, which is in book 9, right? So what do? You get that Breval Concerto in book 6, and you get Sammartini Sonata, and you get Wagner Scherzo, and that's about it. And then you jump into Haydn, and to me, that's way too big of a leap for students to accomplish without some more preparation. And so that's where the thumb position book came from, is that I needed my students to have a lot more experience with thumb position before they got into those concertos.
So you had position pieces 1, then book 2, and then thumb position 1 and book 2?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I didn't intend for it to be 2 thumb position books, but it goes along with the previous thing I said, is that by the time I gave my students what I considered to be enough opportunity to see and repeat and read in each of the 4 basic patterns, it was a whole book all by itself. It didn't start out that way, but that's what it was. And that meant a separate book for everything else. So all the extended hands and all the moving the thumb and all the up and down the fingerboard, all of that occurs in the book too.
Yes, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
I see a nice question from Jean Bean. What other cello books does he like that he would supplement with his own? That's a good question. I'm curious myself.
It is a good question, and it's just the fact of the matter is I basically don't have other books. I think the Suzuki sequence gives us quite a good foundation if you go through there. As I said, I supplement along the way. I introduce a couple of different a couple of individual pieces into the repertoire that I like very much, but it's not, I don't have any books that I would routinely use. One, for instance, is the Squire Bourrée. We have the Squire Danse Rustique, which is fine, but the Bourrée has got so many things in it, including pizzicato chords for the first time, that I think it's just kind of important to have in our repertoire. So I insert that into the sequence of the Suzuki system and use that in addition to everything else.
I'm going to look that one up. I do not know it yet.
Okay. Yes, it's good. It's a good piece. It's got a lot of interesting stuff. It's got sul ponte in it too. It's got ponticello, which the students don't use much in solo playing till you get to Debussy, but you use an orchestra all the time. And it's the kind of thing that you need to know. So it's in that piece, and it's very cool. All the little things that are there in that piece. So I like it very much.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion for everybody to have a look at if you do not know it yet. I see a very nice question. The last question that we printed out, Leslie Johnson Nielsen. Have you got an idea about? I'm beginning to wonder about hand health and how to keep playing as my hands age. Arthritis, is that the correct pronunciation? Would appreciate any tips or insight.
Okay. It's an awfully good question. And I'm afraid I don't have a lot of experience with which to answer it. I am fortunate in that my hands have remained loose. So even though I'm not playing up to the level these days that I used to when I was really playing a lot, my hands, my fingers, and everything, they move fine. So as I said, from my own personal first experience, I can't offer you any advice on that. I will tell you that one of the things I say to people is to no tension. Okay, no tension. And even to my students who usually don't have much tension, when I'm telling them, okay, I need you to fix this spot, we talk about it. I said, look, if this goes wrong at home, the first thing I want you to look at is if you're tight. Now, and the reason is so often that's the cause of it. You can solve it right away. Now, if it's something else, fine, we'll deal with that. But the first thing that often goes wrong when students are trying to do things and having trouble with intervals and patterns and stuff, it's tension. Now, arthritis, I know it provides, double joints is another sort of topic that I have very little that I can help with because I have never dealt with that myself. And I realize that arthritis is a separate entire issue. And the only thing that I can just say about it is just try to make sure your hand is really, really soft and really relaxed all the way back into the base knuckles here. And if you get this, what Margaret Rowell used to call the blob, okay, if you get this blob shape that wiggles this way, it holds its shape, but it wiggles, well, that might help. Now, you probably should seek out people who really do know something about this and get some advice from them. Now, Pam Davenport, here in the United States, she lives up in New England. I don't know that she has an issue with arthritis, but she has had some hand difficulties in the past and has taken some therapy, physical therapy, and has developed some exercises for people to do to help with their individual issues. She is one that might have more information than I. And as I said, other than that, I would just see one of my adult students actually went to Eleanor Schoenfeld with issues about her hand and her arthritis and got some information that was useful to her. So I'm sorry to be so incomplete with the answer to that question, but I just don't feel personally acquainted with it enough to give you any specific advice. Marie.
Well, that is also very clear. I think you did give advice. um,
Okay.
Rick, do you mind reading the question from Sandra Hadderan? Maybe it's Hadderan.
Yes. Oh, this person was wondering if I had ever thought about offering up a certificate upon completion of the 5 books that I did. And the answer is no, I never even thought about it. I just never even thought about it. And you're absolutely right that these days, that kind of thing can be a PDF on a computer, and it could happen fairly easily. But I've never thought about it before. So having this, we'll put it in my head, and we'll see. We need to. We'll want to see what we can do to set it up. I mean, here again, if I'm retired, I maybe have to have somebody to help me with this off into the future, should we begin something like that. But you're right. All 5 of those books is a project. It's a significant achievement to get through all 5 of them. And to have some sort of a certificate at the end might be very, very nice. So I thank you for the idea, because I had never thought of it before. And I'll see what as I said, I'll let it roll around in here for a while, see what we can do.
Fantastic, Rick. Because I totally agree. To me, she says this is a huge accomplishment and deserves recognition to have to go through all your books. And I remember from my childhood that Thompson had a piano book, I think, and at the last page, I could not wait to reach the last page.
I remember that.
Yes.
I remember that book.
Fantastic. Yes.
And that's another idea. I hadn't thought about that. Well,
Yes.
we'll have to think if that can be incorporated actually into the book.
Why not? Why not? And as you say, you could even work with a PDF nowadays, but in your book, why not? It would be great if you leave them a sort of a message. Everybody wants to hear something from the master.
Yeah. It's always fun. Once when I haven't done any traveling since the COVID all started, but I have done things on Zoom and teaching, and it's always oh, there's yours. We got all of our cats are out.
Yes.
It's always fun when the kids want to play their piece from the Position Pieces book for me. It's always fun that's what they want to do. And it's always interesting to me as well when I get registrations from people who are applying, registering for the National Cello Institute. I ask for a series of pieces they've studied recently. Since every one of them does not go through the Suzuki system, I need to have more than one piece by which I can place them properly into classes. And it's always interesting that they write Cecilienne Mooney, and they've written down their position pieces as a list of a thing they've studied recently. So I also enjoy that they think enough of it that they write it down like that.
Nice, very nice. Rick, may I ask, what's your age?
Pardon me?
What's your age? How old are you?
My age? Yeah, I'm 69.
That's very young. You achieved so much.
That's stuff happened. First National Cello Institute, I was 22.
Yes.
So and I told you I started teaching really young, And so it's just sort of the way it's been.
Yes, you just mentioned that you did not travel for a long time. There was one person I do not see her. Oh yeah, it's Karen Lynchnig. Um, she says, I can't think of anything to ask you, but I'll ponder and let you know. I've watched the previous presentations and enjoy seeing Rick's passion. Ask him when he will come to Australia. Have you got any plans to go to
Uh,
Australia?
at this point, I don't. I've been to Australia a couple of times. I've been to New Zealand a couple of times, and they work closely together. Um, but I have not heard any. Let's see. It seems to me that in the relatively recent past, I did some Zoom with Melbourne. So I think the thing to look out for is those kinds of events because well let's face it, I one of the things that I'm happy about, um, I don't want to say anything about this. I talked to Scarlett about this already, but I am having some health issues, and I don't want to go out on an airplane for 11 hours, frankly. And the exposure factor is still around. My brother-in-law just came down with a COVID. So I've been vaccinated, but that doesn't mean you don't get it. It means it's mild if you do get it. So one of the great things about being retired and not having to get out and play concerts and stuff, I can sit up here in my house in the mountains and I don't have to go anywhere. So I'm sort of away from the public and the challenges that entails. And I still wear a mask every place I go. When I run off to the store or something, I still wear a mask, even though it's no longer required to do so here. So there's I'm at this moment in time, I'm so content with what I'm doing. I'm a little bit disinclined to get on airplanes again, but I'm so happy to do Zoom. I mean, I've all my students are on Zoom now, and it just works out so nicely. And if someone, because I've done a couple of Zooms with the Wyoming University here in the United States, and I've done a Zoom. Gosh, did I do is I might have done a Zoom in Amsterdam. A person invited me. I might have, but I did one in Europe. But I stayed here and we had our Zoom, and it was fun. It was great. So I would say, first of all, look for those kind of opportunities. And if you know someone who is creating an event and wants to do that kind of thing, I would be more than happy to give it a try.
Yeah.
Um, it's as I say, it's just my life has changed a bit, and it's become a little bit more isolated, which suits me very well. Being Mr. Introvert, I don't mind it too much, and with a little bit lighter schedule for me now, having officially retired. Even though I still have 9 students, I'm officially retired. So, and I'm quite content with that these days. But I think Zoom is a fabulous alternative. There are certain limitations, as you well know, to what you can accomplish with Zoom in teaching. But it has worked pretty well for me, and I'm happy to use it.
Yes, yes, I understand, and of course, I'm very, very sorry to hear that you're ill. That's an
Yeah.
understatement. Um, um, you have given many things many thoughts. Um, so, did these last years give you some new ideas about what you would like to do anyway, being a cello teacher, writer. Oh, sorry. So,
That's
are there
right.
any?
No, I'm around cats all the time. I love them. You just can't. I'm just not a problem at all. This is Murray. All of them have musical names except Murray. We adopted him from the guy next door who was never there to take care of him. So
Oh,
he became our cat.
he's
So
lucky.
now we have 5. But And I lost the track of your question. I'm sorry.
Um, did this isolation of the
Oh yeah.
last period give you any new ideas, even when you are not well?
Yes. There are a couple of things that I want to do that has been literally on my mind and actually about two-thirds finished for years and years and years. And one of them is Ensembles for Cello Book 5. You all know perhaps that I did cello, duet, and trio accompaniments for the first four books for a teacher who does not have a piano available or who does not themselves actually play the piano. And yet you need to give your students an opportunity to know what it's like to play with an accompaniment. Well, I have the Suzuki repertoire accompaniments, cello accompaniments to the Suzuki repertoire, books 1 through 4. And I have had Danse Rustique and some of these others actually done, at which I've kind of passed around by photocopies for years and years. And so I'm actually working on that again. So one of these days, I hope that we will see a book 5, and it'll make that Golderbund sound so nice, don't you think?
I
When the Golderbund's a nice piece, kind of in its own, but all of these after a while, they're kind of boring. And to have the tune, which exists in the accompaniment, be played by the other cello, suddenly we're going to have something here. Now I've got a 5-part arrangement of the Vivaldi double. And I got a 4-part arrangement of that Vivaldi D major concerto, which I have done both in public and which are quite good, frankly, if I may say so.
yes.
And so one of the first things that I want to do is finish some of those projects. They've been half completed for a very long time. So that's my first idea of what I can do now that my schedule's a little bit more free. And so, yeah, there are things like that kind of on my mind, things that need to be done.
I'm glad to hear that you've got, well, that you're still well.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, it's one of the things you can do this kind of thing for a very long time, and even as I say, even when I'm not out there playing a lot, I still have the teaching things that are on my mind all the time.
Yes, absolutely. It's I guess that will keep you young and going.
Yes.
Yes. Rick, are there other things that you want to tell us, that you want to share with us? Things
Um,
we did not get to?
I don't particularly, as I said to you, even when our first emails, which due to my situation kind of fizzled out after a while. I was so glad when you called me again, contacted me again. Um, that I wasn't thinking about this as like a presentation. I can do a presentation of the books, but I've never done a presentation of biographical stuff. So I did rely a lot on the questions, and I do appreciate that you had them and these people submitted these. And that's so I've kind of wandered around a bit, and so I've probably said pretty much all that I can think of to say, unless someone has come up with another question that arose.
I must say, today we do not have a real live audience, and while I'm on the laptop with you, I'm not able to check the internet. I was quite late, Rick. You must excuse me for that. It only occurred to me this morning that I had to share on Facebook that I would have a Zoom meeting with you and that people could ask their questions. But that was our early morning, and then the United States is sleeping.
Right,
So you
right.
must excuse me for being so late. It,
I'm no, please. It doesn't matter. No apologies necessary as far as I'm concerned. Everything is it's working, and one of the things I might as well just say, because I said it to you in an email. I am thinking these days about legacy and what happens in the future when I'm not there to manage things myself. And so, for instance, I got a guy coming in who I'm hoping will take over the running of the National Cello Institute so that it will not stop when I stop. And I'm seriously working on certain ways of funding it off into the future so that the Cello Institute will have some kind of an endowment in the bank to help carry it on. So I hope that you can expect to see the Cello Institute move forward on. It just there's so the people enjoy it so much, and there seems to be such a great demand for it that I'd like for it to go on as long as possible. And the reason I brought that up is you have given me a great opportunity with these talks to get through the books and now to have a little talk about me to whatever extent that's interesting to people. I don't think I'm that interesting, but it's cool to talk about it. And it's so nice that you've given me this opportunity to get it down. And so that even if we don't have live audience today, everybody can tune in and hear it. And it'll be off there into the future.
I do think that you're very, very interesting. I think you made us all very happy with your wonderful books, which we cannot thank you enough for. Rick, people can also find you on Facebook. That's the
This
way
is
that
true.
I first really saw he's a person. Is he here? You know, because I saw your reaction on some post on Facebook, so people can contact you. Because I was quite late asking for questions, they might maybe send you a question directly.
Right. Okay, that would be fine. I'm not doing too much on Facebook these days. I didn't stay hooked up with the Internet Cello Society, for instance. But these days I try to stay out of discussions of, well, I don't try not to get into arguments with people about teaching, which is pretty easy to do sometimes. They avoid it nowadays. And I try to stay away from arguments about politics, which I don't know, at least the United States these days is a huge issue. And I just stay away from it. I have my very firm opinions that I hold, but I don't try and convince anybody else and don't get into arguments. So you'll see some of my photographs when I post them up there, because that's my big hobby. And I like to post them on Facebook. So you'll see those. And Scarlett has my email address as well. And should you wish to send me something more direct and or more private situation rather than putting it out on Facebook, feel free to use the email, because
Yes,
I'm checking that all the time.
absolutely. Please, dear people, my email address is, for example, under this post that I posted about 10 hours ago. But one can also send me a direct message and ask for your email. You just gave me permission, and you also did an hour ago. So feel free to contact me, and I will put people in contact with you.
Great. That's just great. I'm happy to do that.
Rick, I want to thank you. If this is what we what this talk is for today, I do want to say that you look good. You look well.
Good,
Um,
thank you.
yes. So
Well, yeah, it's I might have, now that we've talked this much about it, I'm trying not to get it out there, folks. Okay, it's just, but it's going to be impossible. People are going to find out. People are going to know. It's that I've got cancer, and so it's the kind of cancer that can't be cured. So but the treatments are working. They're giving me, I'm at a really good place here called Loma Linda University Hospital. And I'll tell you what, they're right on the edge of all the treatments and everything. I've had 2 new kind of treatments already. And it's working. And the doctor himself said, gosh, if doesn't always work this well, and we'll do this for the next 2 years if it's working. So, one doesn't know. I just don't know. And one of the frustrations about this is that they refuse to talk to me about any time frames. And so what's going to happen is going to happen. And that's the way that goes. But right now, things are good, and time will tell.
Yes, yes, time will come. Well, let's for now say that I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I hope that you will be as fit and healthy looking as now. And
Yeah,
maybe we will meet again. And maybe in a year or in 2 years when you say, hey, you never know.
that might be fun. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I
And
never can do anything for you.
okay,
I would not know what I can do for you, but I know, please know that I will be here.
thank you. And once again, let me thank you for the opportunity. Having the opportunity to give people tours through my books that they can then refer to in the future, and especially the couple like Double Stops. It really does benefit from having a guided tour through that. It's been a great service that you provided to make these and make them available. So that's great.
Also, me and other teachers were really helped by the guided tours. So thank you again, again,
Okay.
again.
All
Okay,
right.
take care, Rick.
It's nice to talk with you, and we'll be in touch.
We will be in touch. Dear people, I will, in a few days, I will place this recording, of course, with Rick's permission, on my YouTube channel, and I will share it on Facebook so that you can always look back where the link is. Rick, take care.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.